The tower bell struck its final chime at exactly 2:59 a.m. Alpha King Torin woke with a woman's voice cracking through his skull like thunder. "Torin, the baby is coming, our baby." The words weren't spoken. They poured straight into his blood, raw, desperate, threaded with the opening notes of a song no one else in the kingdom knew. The song she had hummed against his bare chest 9 months ago, while her fingers traced the jagged scar above his heart. When he had believed, for one impossible night, that two rival packs could become one. He sat bolt upright in the vast, empty bed, chest heaving. Sweat cooled on his skin. The silver comb, the one she had left on his pillow like a farewell, lay beneath his palm where he kept it every night, its teeth biting into the calluses he'd earned hunting for her. 9 months of searching every shadowed pass, every healer's hut, every frozen border village. 9 months of the bond aching like a broken rib that would never set right. And now this. She was pregnant, with his child, and she was in labor, alone. Torin's wolf slammed forward so hard his vision flared molten amber. He was already moving, bare feet on the cold stone floor of Stormridge Castle, snatching the comb and looping its silver chain around his neck where it belonged. No guards, no generals. Whatever hell Giselle was facing right now belonged to the two of them alone. He vaulted the balcony rail of the royal tower, night wind slicing across his bare chest. Below, the mountains slept under a thin crescent moon. He shifted midair, bones cracked, muscle tore and reknit, a midnight furred wolf exploding into existence. His paws hit the gravel path in a blur of speed. The comb bounced against his chest like a second heartbeat. He ran northwest, toward the wild, forbidden pines where Valewood and Stormridge bled into each other like an old scar. The bond pulled harder with every stride, a golden thread yanking behind his chest. He could taste her, fear on the wind, could feel the first crushing contraction ripple through the mate link like it was his own body breaking open. 9 months ago, she had run away from him. Tonight, he was running to her. And this time, the mountains themselves would have to move before he let her slip away again. The summit of Silvermist was meant to forge peace between two packs that had hated each other for 3 generations. Instead, it felt like a banquet table set with knives. Giselle stood at the shadowed edge of the great hall, healer's satchel heavy across her body, trying to disappear. But every wolf here could smell the frost and heather of Valewood on her cloak. And the Alpha King of Stormridge had been watching her for the last hour, brooding. She hated that stare. Hated how it made her pulse trip over itself. Hated that her traitor body memorized the exact shade of his amber eyes from the moment their delegations had ridden into the Neutral Valley that morning. Torin Knox, the man whose father her pack still blamed for the massacre at Black Hollow, the man whose border patrols had left 3 of her cousins dead last spring, the man currently carving through the crowd toward her, as though the rest of the room had simply ceased to exist. "You're bleeding," he said without greeting, voice low enough that only she could hear. Giselle glanced down, a thin cut on her thumb from trimming willow bark earlier. She hadn't noticed. "It's nothing. It's not nothing." His hand closed around her wrist before she could retreat. His touch was shockingly gentle for a man built like a mountain, whose fingers snapped necks on battlefields, warm, calloused. The contact sent heat licking up her arms straight to places she refused to name. Their eyes locked. The hall noise faded. The mate bond ignited between them like dry lightning, fierce, undeniable, wrapping around her heart and squeezing. She felt it in her bones, in her blood, in the sudden slick ache between her thighs. His nostrils flared. He smelled it too. "You feel that," he murmured. "I feel a mistake," she whispered back, but she didn't pull away. Torin's mouth curved, just the barest, dangerous tilt. "Then let's make it one worth remembering." She should have walked away. She should have reported him to her Uncle Edwin for even daring to touch a Valewood healer. Instead, hours later, after barbed words traded like blades across the banquet table, after accidental brushes of shoulders that left them both breathing harder, she found herself following him through moonlit corridors to the private royal chambers reserved for the Summit King. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind them. Moonlight striped the fur-covered floor. Torrin turned to her slowly, as though giving her one last chance to run. Giselle lifted her chin. "I still think this is madness." "Good," he said, stepping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Madness is the only honest thing between us." Then his mouth was on hers. She tasted winter pine and smoke on his tongue, felt the low growl vibrate through his chest when she bit his lower lip in return. His hands slid beneath her healer's robes, calluses scraping over her ribs like he was memorizing every inch in case the world ended before dawn. They didn't make it to the bed the first time. Their clothes hit the floor in a frantic trail. He lifted her onto the wide oak table, maps and treaties scattering, and dropped to his knees like a man praying. When his mouth found her, Giselle's head fell back against the stone wall, and she had to bite her own wrist to keep from crying out his name loud enough for both packs to hear. Later, much later, when they finally reached the firs, when he slid into her slow and deep, she wrapped her legs around his waist and felt the bond seal something permanent between them. Not just mating, not just pleasure. Something that felt like home after a lifetime of war. Afterward, they lay tangled, sweat cooling, her head on his chest while his fingers traced idle circles along her spine. The fire in the hearth had burned low. Outside, the first hint of dawn brushed the mountain peaks. Torrin's voice was rough when he spoke. "Stay till morning." She almost said yes. Instead, she rose on one elbow and looked at him. Really looked. The jagged scar across his chest, the faint silver threading through the dark hair at his temples, though he was only 32, the hollow exhaustion in those amber eyes that no crown could hide. He looked like a man who had won every battle and still lost everything that mattered. Without thinking, Giselle reached out and laid her palm over the worst of his scars. Her healer's magic stirred, soft, instinctive. She began to hum. It was an old song, older than the feud, older than the packs themselves. Across the divide where thistle meets heather, moonlight weaves a silver tether. One heart from storm, one from veil. Together they heal what time assailed. Torrin went very still beneath her. Then, so quietly she almost missed it, he joined in on the second verse. "Carry the light when shadows grow long. Sing through the dark till the lost are found strong. Two shores, one moon, one unbreakable song." Tears pricked her eyes. No one in Valewood remembered the full song anymore. Edwin had forbidden it years ago, calling it weakness. Yet here was the enemy king finishing the verses as though he had sung them to his own mother's grave. When the song ended, they stayed wrapped in each other, breathing the same air, hearts beating in sync. For the first time in her life, Giselle let herself imagine a world where a Valewood healer and a Stormridge king could raise children who never had to learn the taste of blood feuds. She fell asleep to the steady thump of his heart beneath her cheek. When she woke, she was greeted by the gray light of dawn and the cold, crushing weight of reality. Torrin slept deeply, one arm still curled possessively around her waist, the silver comb from her braid lying forgotten on the pillow beside his head. She stared at his sleeping face, strong jaw, lips still slightly swollen from her kisses, and felt terror coil in her chest like a living thing. If Edwin found out, if the pack elders learned she had given herself to the son of the man who ordered Black Hollow, if Torrin woke and realized what they had done, what the bond now demanded. She slipped from his arms like a thief, dressed in silence, left the silver comb on the pillow as the only piece of herself she dared give him, an apology, a promise, and a goodbye. At the door, she paused once, looking back at the man who had just rewritten every rule she lived by. Then she ran, through silent corridors, past sleeping guards, down the mountain path where morning mist still clung to the pines. She ran until her lungs burned and her thighs shook, until the summit keep was a distant smudge behind her. She didn't stop until she crossed back into Valewood territory 3 days later, half-starved and hollow-eyed. Only then, kneeling by a freezing stream to drink, did she feel it, the tiniest flutter low in her belly. Not sickness, not imagination. New life. Torin's child. Giselle pressed both hands over the place where their child was growing and whispered the opening line of the lullaby to the water. She was 28 years old, the best healer her pack had seen in a generation, yet she had never been more alone. Back in her small cabin on the remote western fringe of Valewood lands, far enough from the main village that no one would question her sudden wasting lung sickness, she began the lie that would become her life. Loose robes, weekly supply drops left at the edge of the clearing, claims of contagious illness that kept even her Uncle Edwin at bay. Every full moon the bond tugged at her like a hook behind her chest, and every full moon she sang the lullaby to the growing curve of her belly until the ache dulled enough to breathe. She told herself it was protection, for the unborn child, for Torin, for the fragile peace the summit had barely achieved. She forbade herself from singing their song through the bond. She told herself a lot of things in the long, lonely months that followed. But at 2:59 a.m. on a cold autumn night, 9 months to the day after she had left the silver comb on his pillow, labor tore through her like wildfire, and the only name she could scream was his. And the bond, finally, mercilessly, answered. Torin was coming. Torin's wolf ran through the night like a storm-given teeth. His paws devoured the miles, claws tearing black earth and frost-crusted pine needles. The bond was a live wire now, yanking him forward with every contraction that ripped through Giselle. He felt them as phantom pain, sharp, relentless, blooming low in his own belly like knives twisting. Her fear tasted metallic on his tongue. Her exhaustion was a weight in his lungs, and beneath it all, the faint, steady heartbeat of their child pulsed through the link like a second moon rising. He didn't stop to think about the impossibility of it, didn't let himself wonder how she had hidden this from him, from everyone, for 9 full months. The pain she must have endured. He only ran. The border wilds rose around him, jagged ridges, frozen streams, the scent of rival territory growing thicker with every passing second. Valewood wolves patrolled these fringes, but tonight the wind carried only silence and the distant howl of an owl. Torin stayed low, shadow to shadow, avoiding the main trails. He had no illusions. If Edwin Calder's scouts caught his scent before he reached her, they would kill first and ask questions never. Memories crashed over him in rhythm with his stride. The first full moon after she fled, he had stood on the highest tower of Stormridge Castle and howled until his throat bled, calling her name through the bond until the moon itself seemed to flinch. Nothing answered. The second moon, he had ridden the borders himself, interrogating traders, bribing lone wolves, threatening anyone who looked like they might know something. Still nothing. By the third, the council had begun to whisper that their king was unraveling. By the 6th, he had stopped sleeping in the royal bed entirely because the sheets still carried the ghost of her scent. Every full moon since, the bond had tugged, faint, stubborn, like a thread caught on a thorn. He had learned to live with the ache the way a man learns to live with a missing limb. Constant, dull, but impossible to ignore. He kept the silver comb on its chain around his neck, hidden beneath his tunic during council meetings, touching it when no one watched like a talisman against madness. But now that thread was screaming. He crested the final ridge just as the sky began to bruise toward dawn. Below lay a narrow valley cupped between 2 shoulders of mountain, a forgotten place where Valewood pines met Storm Ridge granite in uneasy truce. A single cabin crouched at the valley's heart, small, weathered, smoke curling thin from its chimney. The windows were dark except for one faint, flickering glow. Giselle? Torin slowed, flanks heaving. He shifted back mid-stride, bones cracking and realigning, fur melting away into skin, until he stood naked and human again on the frozen grass, breath fogging the air in sharp bursts. Inside his head, his wolf stirred. "We are indecent. Cover yourself." "She is laboring. She should not see us like this." The voice was gruff, but oddly gentle, the way an old hound might nudge a pup back from the edge of a cliff. Torin almost laughed, breathless, disbelieving at the sheer absurdity of it. He glanced down at himself, sweat slicked, streaked with pine sap and dirt from the run, muscles still twitching from the shift. Naked as the day he was born. His wolf was right. This was not how he wanted her first sight of him after all this time. He scanned the clearing quickly. A rough wool cloak, Giselle's by the faint heather scent, hung on a wooden peg beside the door, probably left out to air. He snatched it, wrapped it around his shoulders in one swift motion, and tied the leather thong at the throat. It was too short, barely reaching mid-thigh, and smelled overwhelmingly of her. Frost, dried herbs, the ghost of every lonely night she'd worn it while carrying their child. His wolf settled, satisfied. Better. Now go to her. Torin exhaled once, steadying himself, then stepped forward. The cabin door was barred from inside. He didn't knock, couldn't wait that long, but he also didn't smash through like some conquering beast. Instead, he laid his palm flat against the rough planks, feeling the faint vibration of her breathing on the other side, and pushed gently. The wooden bar groaned, then gave with a soft crack. The door swung inward on silent hinges. Giselle stood in the center of the single room, one hand braced on the back of a chair, the other cradling the enormous curve of her belly beneath her loose shift. Sweat darkened the hair at her temples. Strands clung to her pale cheeks. Her storm-gray eyes snapped to him the instant the door opened, wide with shock, then narrowing in something between fury and fragile relief. Torin froze in the threshold, the borrowed cloak slipping slightly off one shoulder. He made no move to adjust it. He simply stood there, letting her see him, disheveled, breathless, wrapped in her cloak. "Giselle," he said, voice rough from the cold and the miles. "I came." Her gaze flicked from his face to the too-short cloak, then back up. For a heartbeat, something almost amused flickered in her eyes. "You're wearing my cloak," she managed. Torin managed a crooked half-smile, the first real one in months. "My wolf insisted. Didn't want to scare you more than I already have." Another contraction hit. She gasped, doubling forward, fingers digging into the chair until the wood creaked. Torin crossed the room in 2 long strides, catching her before her knees could buckle. He wrapped his arms around her from behind carefully, letting her lean her full weight against his chest. The cloak parted slightly, her back pressed to his bare skin, warm despite everything. She stiffened at first, then sagged, too exhausted to fight. Her head fell back against his shoulder. "You're really here," she whispered, as though testing the words. "I'm here." He pressed his lips to her damp temple, breathing her in, sweat, pain, heather, and the sweet new scent of their daughter so close to the surface. "And I'm not leaving again. Not ever." She laughed once, short, shaky, almost a sob. "You burst in here half naked and wrapped in my laundry like some lovesick stray." "Guilty," he murmured against her hair. "Blame my wolf. He's very concerned with manners tonight." Another wave of pain rolled through her. She gripped his forearms hard, nails biting skin. When it passed, she turned her face into the crook of his neck, voice muffled. I didn't think you'd come. I felt you singing, he said quietly. Through the bond. I would have crawled over every mountain if I had to. She closed her eyes, breathing him in, the pine smoke and storm scent that had haunted her dreams for months. She's early. I didn't want to do this alone. You're not alone. He guided her gently toward the narrow bed, already prepared with clean linens and a basin of boiled water she must have set out earlier. Tell me what to do. I'm yours to command. Giselle sank onto the edge of the mattress, one hand still cradling her belly. She looked up at him, sweat-streaked, exhausted, but with a flicker of something softer in her gray eyes. First, she said, a tiny smile tugging at her lips despite the pain. You can stop looking like you're about to cry. It's unnerving. Torin huffed a laugh. Too late. She reached up, brushed a thumb across his cheek where a tear had escaped without him noticing. Sit. Help me breathe through the next one. He dropped to his knees in front of her, taking both her hands in his. The cloak pooled around him on the floorboards like spilled ink. They stayed like that, foreheads almost touching, breathing in rhythm, as the next contraction built. As Torin knelt before her, hands steady on hers, Giselle's mind raced faster than any contraction. The warmth of his palms should have soothed. Instead, it terrified her, because he was here, in her cabin, on Valewood soil, the scent of Storm Ridge clinging to him like a declaration of war. She pulled one hand free and pressed it to his chest, right over the place where the silver chain lay hidden. Her fingers found the familiar shape of the comb, the teeth pressed into her palm through the fabric, cold and real. You kept it, she whispered. Torin's gaze never left hers. It was the only piece of you I had left. Her throat closed. For 9 months she had pictured him throwing it into a fire or letting it gather dust in some forgotten drawer. Instead, he had worn it against his heart like a wound he refused to let heal. The sight of it, of him, undid something inside her. The terror that had kept her alive these long months cracked open, just enough for longing to rush in. She wanted to bury her face in his neck and sob, but she also wanted to shove him out the door before Edwin's scouts scented him. Another contraction built, slower this time, giving her a cruel moment of clarity. You shouldn't be here. I shouldn't have called for you, she said, voice low and shaking. If they find you, they won't. His thumb stroked the back of her hand. Not until she's safe. Not until you're safe. She leaned forward until her forehead rested against his. Their breaths mingled, harsh, uneven. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to this, his hands in hers, the comb pressing between them, the tiny kicks of their daughter against her ribs like tiny drum beats saying, he's here. He's here. I was so afraid your council would take her, Giselle whispered, that she'd be used as a political pawn before she could walk. Torin went still. Never. You say that now. Her voice cracked. But kings don't get to choose mercy, not when the council is watching, not when Black Hollow is still carved into every elder's memory. He lifted her hand and pressed it harder against the comb. I broke every council law to come here alone. No escort, no declaration. If they find out I crossed the border without sanction, they'll call it treason. But I chose you anyway. Both of you. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I heard Edwin, she said, the words spilling faster. Years ago, after Black Hollow, he was drunk, raging in the Elder Hall. Said any child born of Vale and Calder blood would be a curse, that it would weaken us, that if one ever came, he'd make sure it never drew a second breath. Torin's jaw clenched so hard she heard the muscle pop. He threatened you? Not directly. He never had to. He just made sure we all understood the cost. She swallowed. I ran because I believed him, because I believed you would be forced to choose between your crown and a child no one wanted. So I chose for her. I chose to disappear. Torin's hands tightened around hers fiercely. You were wrong about one thing. She lifted her eyes to his. I would have burned the crown before I let anyone harm her. Or you. The words landed like stones in her heart, casting ripples of hope she couldn't afford to feel. Another contraction rolled through her, deeper this time. She cried out, unable to hold it back. Torin moved instantly, sliding onto the bed behind her, pulling her back against his chest so she could brace against him. His arms came around her, one hand splayed protectively over her belly. Breathe, he murmured against her ear. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Like this. She followed his rhythm. Slow inhale, controlled exhale, and hated how easily her body obeyed. Hated how her lungs remembered the exact cadence he'd used that night at the summit, when he'd held her trembling in the aftermath of their first joining, whispering the same steady pattern against her throat until her racing heart slowed. Back then, it had been pleasure overwhelming her. Now it was pain. Yet the rhythm felt the same. Safe, right, but dangerous. She closed her eyes, fighting the wave of longing that crashed through the fear. When the contraction eased, she turned her face into his throat. I'm scared, Torin. Not just of the birth, of what comes after. Edwin's scouts patrol closer every week. They smell something. Sickness, they think. But if they sent you here... Torin pressed his lips to her temple. Then we move faster. She comes, we get you both out, and I deal with whatever follows. You make it sound simple. It's not. His voice was raw, but it's the only path I see. Silence stretched between contractions, thin, fragile. Outside, the wind shifted. Not much at first, a low moan through the pines, carrying the faintest thread of unfamiliar musk on the air. Giselle's nostrils flared instinctively. She went rigid against his chest. Torin felt it too. His head tilted slightly, listening. Winds change direction, he murmured, bringing scents from the ridge. She swallowed. They've been circling wider lately, testing the perimeter. Last week they left tracks within 100 yards of the clearing. I thought it was just routine. Another faint sound, distant, deliberate. A branch snapping under careful weight. Then silence again, too perfect. Torin's arms tightened fractionally. They're not circling anymore. Giselle's pulse hammered in her throat. She pressed her palm harder against her belly, as though she could shield the baby from what was coming. The supply boy. He reports to Edwin directly. I missed the last drop 2 days ago. Couldn't make it to the edge. If he told them I'm weakening... Torin's jaw clenched. The wind gusted again, sharper this time, carrying the unmistakable scent of 5 wolves moving with purpose, leather and steel and the sharp tang of oiled blades. Closer, too close. Giselle's breath hitched. They're here. Torin's head snapped toward the door, his nostrils flared wide. North and east, closing fast. They know something's wrong. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Edwin's been waiting for an excuse. If they find you... Torin eased her back against the pillows and stood, the cloak falling open to reveal the hard lines of his body beneath. He didn't bother closing it. His wolf was too close to the surface now, amber bleeding into his irises. Stay here, he said quietly. Keep breathing. I'll handle them. No. She grabbed his wrist. You can't fight 5 Valewood enforcers alone, not without killing them. And if you kill them, the feud reignites, I know. He crouched again, cupping her face. But I won't let them near you. Not while you're like this. Her fingers dug into his arm. Then don't fight. Talk. Stall. Give me time to get her out. Torin searched her eyes, storm gray meeting amber, and something shifted in his expression. Not surrender, but acceptance. I'll buy you time, he said. But if they force my hand... I know. She pressed her forehead to his. Just come back. Torin didn't answer with words. He kissed her, hard, fast, and devastating. His mouth claimed hers like he was starving, like 9 months of silence had been a wound, and this was the only way to heal it. One hand cupped the back of her neck, fingers threading into sweat-damp hair, tilting her head so he could take more, deeper. The other slid to her lower back, pulling her flush against him despite the swell of her belly between them. She tasted salt, tears, sweat, the edge of fear. A low growl rumbled in his chest, vibrating into her mouth, and she answered with a soft sound she couldn't suppress. Her hands fisted in the cloak at his shoulders, yanking him closer even as another contraction threatened to crest. She kissed him back with everything she'd buried, the lonely nights singing to their daughter, the terror of hiding, the ache of wanting him every full moon when the bond tugged and she forced herself to stay silent. Her tongue brushed his, tentative, then hungry, and for one searing heartbeat the world shrank to this. His heat, his taste, the way his thumb stroked the pulse at her throat like he was memorizing it all over again. She felt him harden against her hip, felt the tremor in his arms as he fought the instinct to lift her, pin her to the wall, finish what they'd started. She wanted it too, but the next pain was already building, and outside the scouts were closing. Torin broke the kiss first, breathing harshly against her mouth. His forehead rested on hers again, eyes closed, fighting for control. I want to stay, he rasped, voice wrecked. I want to lay you down and remind you exactly how much I've missed you. Every inch, every sound you make. Her laugh was shaky, half sob. Later, she whispered, fingers still tangled in his cloak. Promise me later. Later, he vowed, pressing one last fierce kiss to the corner of her mouth, then her jaw, then the sensitive spot beneath her ear that made her shiver even now. I'm not leaving you again. Not for a moment longer than I have to. Then he turned, cloak swirling, and stepped toward the door. Outside, shadows moved among the pines. Low growls carried on the wind. The scouts had scented him. Giselle clutched the edge of the bed, breathing through the next building pane, listening to the man she had run from, the man she had never stopped loving, walk out to face her own pack alone. The door clicked shut behind him, and in the silence that followed, she began to sing, soft, trembling, the lullaby that had called him here. Across the divide where thistle meets heather, the notes wrapped around her like armor, around the child fighting to be born. She sang for more time. She sang for mercy. She sang for the impossible hope that, somehow, they might all three survive the dawn. Torin stepped into the clearing and the night air hit him like a blade, cold, sharp, laced with the scent of 5 Valewood enforcers closing in from 3 directions. The moon had risen higher, silvering the frost on the pines, turning the valley into a stage lit for violence. He didn't shift. Not yet. He stood tall in Giselle's cloak, bare legs planted in the frozen grass, arms loose at his sides. The silver comb thumped against his chest with every heartbeat. Behind him, through the thin cabin walls, he heard Giselle's low, steady singing, her voice trembling but unbroken. The scouts emerged from the tree line one by one, silent as shadows, furred forms melting into human shapes as they stepped into moonlight. 5 males, all armed, short blades at hips, bows slung across backs. They wore the dark green leathers of Valewood border guard, faces painted with ash streaks for night work. Their eyes gleamed yellow in the dark. The leader, a broad-shouldered wolf named Ronan, Giselle's cousin, stepped forward first. His nostrils flared as he scented Stormridge on the wind. "Torin," Ronan said, voice flat with disbelief and rising fury. "You crossed the border, alone, into Calderland. Explain yourself before we drag you back in pieces." Torin's voice carried calm across the clearing. "I'm not here for war. I'm here for my mate and my child." A ripple of shock passed through the enforcers. Ronan's hand dropped to his blade hilt. "Your child?" "Giselle is in labor, inside that cabin, right now." Torin kept his hands visible, palms open. "If you force your way in, you risk killing them both. Stand down. Let me finish what I came for." Ronan laughed, short, harsh. "You think we'll believe the Stormridge King snuck across the border for a midwife visit? Edwin sent us because Giselle's been hiding something. Sense wrong, supplies untouched. And now you're here, reeking of her." His eyes narrowed. "Step aside, Torin. We're taking her home, to face judgment." Torin's wolf surged beneath his skin, claws itching to extend. He forced it down. "She's not going anywhere. Not until the baby's born. Not until she's strong enough to walk out of here on her own feet." Another enforcer, a leaner wolf named Kel, spat into the frost. "She's been tainted, carrying Stormridge spawn. Edwin was right. She's a traitor." Torin's gaze flicked to Kel, then back to Ronan. "Edwin told you that?" Ronan's jaw tightened. "He told us enough. Said she'd been compromised at the summit. Said if anything came of it, we were to end it. Cleanly." Torin felt the words land like red-hot stones in his gut. His vision narrowed to pinpoints. Blood roared in his ears. Inside his skull, his wolf snarled, low, vicious. Rip his throat out and feed it to the crows. Slowly. Torin's hands flexed at his sides, claws itching to extend. He forced them back, but the effort made his voice come out rougher, edged with barely leashed thunder. "You believed him?" "Without question." Ronan hesitated, just a fraction. "He's elder. He's family. He's kept the feud alive, so we remember what Stormridge took from us at Black Hollow." Torin exhaled slowly. "Black Hollow was my father's crime. Not mine. I've spent 9 years trying to end the cycle. Giselle believed the same. That's why she ran. Not because she betrayed you, because she was protecting a child from the man who would kill it to keep the hate burning." The enforcers shifted, uneasy. Ronan's grip on his blade loosened slightly. "You're lying." "I'm not." Torin opened the cloak just enough to show the silver comb hanging against his chest. "She left this on my pillow that night. I've worn it every day since. If I wanted leverage, I'd have come with an army. I came alone. Because she called. Because the bond doesn't lie." Inside the cabin, Giselle's song faltered for a heartbeat, another contraction ripping through her. Torin felt it like a knife twist in his own belly. He took one step back toward the door, instinctive. Ronan's blade came up. "Don't move." Torin froze. "She's bleeding out there. Early labor. No healer but me. If you want her alive to face your judgment, you let me go back inside." Kel snarled. "We take her now. Edwin's orders were clear. Bring her back or end the problem here." Torin's eyes flashed amber. "Try." The standoff shattered. Kel lunged first, blade slicing a silver arc toward Torin's throat. Torin twisted, caught the wrist mid-swing, and wrenched. Kel's howl tore the night as the knife clattered to the frost. Ronan roared, shifting mid-stride, gray fur exploding outward, massive wolf crashing forward. The other 3 followed, 2 wolves leaping low, 1 human staying back with bow already drawn. Torin shifted in the same heartbeat, midnight fur ripping across skin, cloak shredding, silver comb spinning free and glinting as it hit the ground. He met Ronan chest to chest, jaws clashing in a brutal collision. They rolled across the frozen clearing, claws raking fur and flesh, teeth seeking purchase. Ronan's weight was heavy, experienced, but Torin's was bigger. He fought with ruthless control, dodging lethal bites, landing blows that cracked ribs but never severed arteries. He clamped down on Ronan's shoulder, teeth sinking through muscle, shaking once, hard. The joint popped with a wet crunch. Ronan yelped, staggering sideways, blood matting his gray fur. Torin released him instantly, spun, only to meet the black wolf mid-leap. He caught it by the throat in his jaws, slammed it down so hard the ground shuddered, then pinned it with a forearm across its windpipe. The wolf thrashed once, twice, then went limp, breathing shallow, alive. The bowman loosed. The arrow hissed through the dark. Torin twisted, but too slow. Steel punched through muscle just below his ribs, grating against bone. White-hot agony exploded inside him, bright, blinding, stealing breath. He felt the shaft grind deeper with every heartbeat, felt hot blood flood his side, drip dark onto frost. A roar ripped from his throat, half pain, half fury, and he staggered, legs buckling for 1 second before he locked them again. Inside the cabin, Giselle's song snapped off in a raw cry. Through the bond she felt it, fire tearing through her own ribs, lungs seizing. Torin! He didn't fall. He released the black wolf, unconscious, chest rising weakly, and turned, blood streaming down his flank, to face the remaining 3. Ronan shifted back, human again, clutching his mangled shoulder, face ashen. He stared at Torin, at the arrow jutting from his side, at the deliberate restraint in every move, and something cracked in his expression. "Stand down," Ronan barked, voice hoarse. "He's not fighting to kill us." The 2 wolves froze mid-crouch, ears flat. The bowman's hands shook. The bow dipped lower, arrow still knocked but no longer aimed at Torin's heart. Torin shifted human, slow, painful, midnight fur receding, leaving him naked and bleeding in the moonlight. The arrow shaft protruded obscenely. Every shallow breath dragged fresh fire through his chest. He pressed a hand to the wound and met Ronan's eyes. "I could have torn your throat out," he said, voice low, ragged. "I could have ended every one of you, but I didn't." He jerked his chin toward the cabin door. "Because she's in there singing our daughter into the world, and I won't let her first breath be stained with her own kin's blood." Listen to Ronan. "I didn't come to slaughter your kin. I came for my family. If you want Giselle alive, if you want the child alive, let me finish this." Ronan stared at him, chest heaving, eyes still conflicted. "Edwin said—" "Edwin lied," came Giselle's voice from the doorway. She stood framed in the open door, one hand braced on the jamb, the other wrapped protectively around her swollen belly. Sweat soaked her shift. Pain etched deep lines around her mouth and eyes, but her voice rang clear, cutting through the night. Ronan's face drained of color. "Giselle, Edwin didn't just want the feud to continue," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her legs. "He built it. After Black Hollow, he started the rumors himself, said Torin had sworn in private council to destroy any child born of a Valewood bond, that it would be cleansing to prevent weakness in our line. He made sure I overheard him telling the elders. He planted letters, forged ones, claiming Torin had already ordered scouts to hunt down any tainted offspring. He told me, to my face, that if I ever carried Stormridge blood, Torin would rip it from me himself to keep his throne pure." The enforcers went still. Ronan's good hand clenched at his side. "He lied," Giselle continued, each word sharper than the last. "Torin never said those things. He never ordered hunts. Edwin invented every word to make sure no one, not me, not any of you, would ever trust a bridge between our packs. Because if we did, If the feud ended, Edwin would lose the power he's clung to for decades. He needed us afraid. He needed me terrified enough to run. And I was. Ronan shook his head slowly, voice cracking. That can't be true. He's elder. He's family. He's a coward who fed on our grief, Giselle said. I believed him because I was young and grieving my cousins. I believed him because he made the lie sound like mercy. But I was wrong, and so were you. Another contraction hit, harder, deeper. She gasped, knees buckling, free hand flying to the doorframe for support. Torin lunged, ignoring the arrow still lodged in his side, fresh blood soaking through his fingers, and caught her before she fell. He lowered her gently back inside the threshold, half carrying her to the edge of the bed so she could brace against it. Breathe, he murmured, voice rough with pain and urgency. I've got you. Giselle clutched his arm, breathing hard through the wave. Her eyes never left Ronan's, fierce even through the agony. I'm about to bring her into this world, she panted. Your niece, your blood, and Edwin would have killed her before she drew breath. Look at what he's done to us. Look at what he's made you become. Ronan's gaze dropped to the blood on the frost, to the silver comb glinting nearby, to Giselle's face, pale, sweat-streaked, but still determined. Torin looked up from where he knelt beside Giselle, blood still streaming from his wound. Stand down. Let me get her through this. Then we talk. No more blood tonight. Ronan met his eyes, long, searching, then nodded once. No more blood. He turned to his men. Weapons down. Form a perimeter. No one enters until the child is born. The enforcers obeyed, slowly, reluctantly. Torin eased Giselle fully onto the bed, kicking the door mostly shut behind him. He pressed a clean cloth to his own side to slow the bleeding, then turned back to her. His wolf stirred inside his head, suddenly fussy. Wash your hands first, idiot. Pup's coming. Don't touch her with blood on you. She needs clean. Torin huffed a breathless laugh despite the fire in his ribs. Torin plunged his hands into the basin of boiled water Giselle had prepared earlier, scrubbing fast and thorough, pink swirling down the drain. He dried his hands on a fresh cloth, knelt between her legs again, and took her hands in his, gentle, steady, despite the tremor in his own fingers. Look at me, he said softly. I've got you. Both of you. Giselle nodded, tears slipping free. She gripped his hand hard enough to bruise. She pushed. Once, twice, 3 times, each one fiercer, each one pulling a raw sound from her throat. On the 4th, a wet rush, a slippery weight, and then a tiny, furious cry split the quiet cabin like sunlight through clouds. Torin caught their daughter in his shaking hands. Small, red, perfect. Dark curls plastered to her scalp, eyes squeezed shut, mouth open in indignant wail. He stared, breathless, stunned. Giselle reached down, trembling. Give her to me. He laid the baby on her chest, skin to skin. The infant quieted instantly, tiny fist curling against her mother's collarbone, as though she'd been waiting her whole short life to find that exact spot. Giselle looked up at Torin through tears. She has your eyes. He touched one perfect miniature hand, thumb brushing the soft knuckles. She has your mouth. For one suspended heartbeat, they simply existed. 3 heartbeats in one small room, the rest of the world forgotten. Torin leaned in, pressed his forehead to Giselle's, then bent to brush the lightest kiss to their daughter's damp head. She smelled like new life, like everything he'd never known he was missing. Outside, Ronan and the enforcers stood frozen in the clearing, listening to the newborn cry fade to soft hiccups. The wind died completely. The pines held still. The world seemed to hold its breath with them. Then Edwin's voice sliced through the silence, cold, furious, from the tree line. So the abomination lives. He stepped into the moonlight, tall, silver-haired, flanked by 2 more enforcers who had waited in reserve. His eyes locked on the cabin door, lips curling in disgust. Torin lifted his head slowly. Blood still seeped from his side, but the fury in his eyes burned brighter than pain. He rose, slow, deliberate, refusing to sway, placing himself between the door and Edwin. The movement cost him. A fresh trickle of blood slid down his ribs, but he stood tall, shoulders squared. No weakness. Not now. Not while his mate and daughter were still breathing. Edwin smiled, thin, venomous, the kind of smile that had poisoned generations. You should have killed it before it drew breath, Giselle. Now I'll have to do it myself. And you, Torin, you'll watch while I cut the weakness out of our line. Torin's snarl ripped free, low and guttural. Over my body. Edwin gestured sharply. His 2 enforcers shifted in perfect sync. Silver-gray wolves, lean and vicious, launching straight for Torin's throat. Torin met them half-shifted, claws extended, midnight fur rippling across shoulders and arms. He caught the first wolf by the throat mid-leap, slammed it into the frozen ground with a crack that echoed off the pines. The second raked claws down his back, deep, burning furrows that tore muscle and sprayed blood across the frost. Pain detonated white-hot. Torin roared, spun, and drove his jaws into the wolf's muzzle. The wolf dropped, whimpering, legs twitching. Edwin drew a dagger, silver blade etched with old runes, glinting cruelly in the moonlight. Enough games. He advanced on Torin, eyes blazing with hatred. Inside, Giselle clutched the newborn against her chest, the tiny body still slick, still trembling with its first ragged breaths. She began to sing, soft, trembling, voice cracking on the opening notes. Across the divide where thistle meets heather, Torin heard it through the bond, felt the melody wrap around his failing heart like moonlight on water. Strength flooded his limbs, not enough to heal the arrow wound or the claw marks weeping blood down his spine, but enough to stand. Edwin lunged. Torin caught his wrist just in time and twisted hard. The dagger clattered to the frost. Edwin snarled, shifted, massive silver wolf, old scars crisscrossing his muzzle, eyes burning with bloodlust. He slammed into Torin like a battering ram. Torin went down hard, back slamming into frozen earth, arrow shaft driving deeper with a sickening grind against rib. Pain blinded him, white and absolute. Edwin's weight pinned him. Fangs sank into his shoulder, tearing, grinding, as Torin's artery tore open. His wolf clawed at the walls of consciousness, frantic, weakening. A low, broken whimper echoed in the dark space behind his eyes, paws scrabbling uselessly against the black tide rising. The wolf that had run miles through storm and night, that had guarded him through every lonely full moon, was fading, voice thinning to a desperate, fading keen. All is lost. The thought hit him clear and cold. Edwin's jaws tightened. Torin's vision tunneled, black creeping in at the edges like ink spilling across parchment. He felt the pup's heartbeat stutter through the bond, felt Giselle's song falter as terror flooded her. Edwin had won. The feud would live. Their daughter would never see dawn. Then, footsteps. Soft, frantic, crunching frost. Giselle burst from the cabin door, newborn still clutched to her chest, shift clinging wetly to her thighs. She ran barefoot into the clearing, 3 desperate strides, dropped to her knees beside them, heedless of the blood soaking the snow. Torin! Her voice cracked, raw, pleading, stripped of everything but need. Don't leave us. She pressed one trembling hand to his chest, right over his heart. Tears fell hot onto his skin. Please, she whispered, voice breaking. I need you. She needs you. Come back to us. She began to sing again, fierce, desperate, pouring every ounce of love and fear and hope into the notes. Carry the light when shadows grow long. Sing through the dark till the lost are found strong. The lullaby wrapped around him like arms pulling him from drowning. The bond, frayed, bleeding, snapped taut. Power surged, raw, ancient, unbreakable, suddenly flooding through the connection like wildfire in dry grass. Inside, his wolf heard her. His claws dug in one last time. Ours. Protect. Keep. Torin's body bucked, wild, desperate. Muscle and will surged together. He rolled Edwin beneath him in one violent twist, the elder's fangs tearing free with a spray of blood. Torin's claws, midnight black, razor sharp, raked down Edwin's side in deep, deliberate furrows. Flesh parted, muscle split. Silver fur bloomed crimson in thick, wet streaks. Edwin yelped, shifted back, blood streaming from ribs and shoulder. "You can't kill me," he gasped, clutching the wound. "You kill me. You kill any chance of peace." Torin stood over him, bleeding, swaying, eyes blazing amber. "Peace was never your goal." He looked up. Ronan and the original 5 enforcers had formed a loose circle, silent, weapons lowered, faces pale in the moonlight. "Uncle," Giselle said quietly. Edwin looked at her, at the tiny bundle in her arms, his face twisted in disgust. "That thing is your blood," Giselle said, "and his, and she's alive. She's here, and the feud ends tonight." The newborn stirred against Giselle's chest, small, instinctive movements at first. Then her tiny hand lifted, fingers splaying open like a starfish reaching for light. She didn't cry. She simply stretched toward Torin, toward the sound of his voice. The little fist brushed his blood-streaked forearm. A heartbeat stuttered through the bond, hers answering his, small and fierce and utterly trusting. Torin froze. The air around them shimmered, soft at first, like heat rising from sun-warmed stone, then brighter, warmer, as though the night itself had exhaled. Their bond, fractured for 9 months, snapped fully into place. Torin staggered forward one step, then another, until he stood close enough to feel Giselle's warmth through the cold. He lifted a shaking, bloodied hand and cupped her face gently, thumb brushing away a tear. "I love you," he said, voice breaking on the words. "I never stopped. I never stopped," she whispered. "I was just too afraid to believe it could be real." He leaned in, kissed her, soft, reverent, tasting of salt and relief. Then he looked down at their daughter. The baby's hand was still outstretched, tiny fingers flexing weakly, reaching for him again. Torin's breath caught. He looked back at Giselle, eyes raw, asking without words. She nodded, small, certain, tears slipping free. Giselle tilted her head to the side, exposing the curve of her neck, the place where the bond had always waited to be sealed. Torin bent slowly. His lips brushed her skin first, gentle. Then his teeth grazed the soft spot just below her ear. He sank in, deep enough to claim, shallow enough not to harm. She arched against him with a soft gasp, fingers threading into his hair, holding him there. She turned her face into his neck and bit him in return, sharp, claiming, sealing. The bond flared white-hot now. The meadow around the cabin surged with newfound power. Thistle and heather burst from frozen earth, stems twining together, blossoms opening in defiant purple and white. A living carpet spread outward, visible to every wolf present, proof older than any feud, older than hate itself. Edwin stared at the flowers, face ashen. "Impossible!" Ronan stepped forward. "It's not. It's the bridge. The song always said it would come." The enforcers murmured, low, awed. Weapons dropped entirely. Torin sank to his knees, blood loss finally winning in the wave of relief. Giselle caught him, lowered him to the grass. "Stay with me," she whispered, tears falling on his face. He smiled weakly. "Always." She sang again, the healing song now, the one she'd hummed over his scars that first night. Soft magic flowed from her throat, from her hands pressed to his chest. The arrow wound began to knit, slowly, painfully, flesh closing around steel. The claw marks on his back sealed to raw pink lines. The flowers bloomed brighter. The wolves watched in silence. Edwin turned, slow, defeated, and walked into the pines alone. Ronan knelt beside Giselle. "We'll take him back, to answer for what he's done." The sun rose like a promise over the Storm Ridge Mountains, painting the blooming meadow in shades of gold and rose. The intertwined thistle and heather stretched as far as the eye could see, a living testament to the bridge that had finally been built. Giselle sat in the grass, their daughter nestled against her chest, Torrin's head in her lap as she stroked his hair. His wounds had closed, but the exhaustion lingered in the deep lines around his eyes, in the way his breath came slow and steady. Ronan and the enforcers had lingered only long enough to witness the miracle, then departed with promises to spread the truth. Edwin, however, hadn't gotten far. Ronan had caught him at the edge of the pines, bound him with his own cloak, and dragged him back to Valewood's main village. The elders had been summoned by dawn's light, and now, as the sun climbed higher, justice waited. Giselle looked down at Torrin. "We need to go," she said softly. "Edwin won't face this alone. I have to be there." Torrin opened his eyes, amber, tired, but fierce. "You're not strong enough yet. You just gave birth." She smiled faintly. "And you just nearly died, but this ends today, for all of us." His wolf stirred in his mind, gruff, protective. "She's right, you know. Besides, the pup needs to see her mama stand tall." They traveled slowly, Torrin carrying Giselle in his arms, their daughter bundled between them. Ronan met them at the village edge with a small escort, faces solemn. The main hall was packed. Valewood elders, pack members young and old, whispers rippling like wind through pines as they entered. Edwin stood in chains at the center, silver hair disheveled, wounds bandaged but seeping, eyes still burning with unquenched hate. When he saw Giselle, his lip curled. "You," he spat, "and your Storm Ridge filth." Torrin tensed, but Giselle laid a hand on his arm. She stepped forward, cradling the baby close. "Uncles are supposed to protect, but you poisoned us all. You planted lies about Torrin, said he'd hunt any child of the bond. You made me run, made me hide, also the feud would never die. Because without hate, what power do you have?" Murmurs rose. An elder, old Myra, with her white braid and sharp eyes, stepped forward. "We need proof. Words are wind." Giselle nodded to Ronan. He unrolled a parchment, one of Edwin's forged letters, found in his quarters during the dawn search. Myra read it aloud. Claims of Torrin's secret orders to assassinate any mixed-blood heirs, signed with a false Stormridge seal. "Lies," Edwin snarled, "to protect us from weakness." Giselle shook her head. "No, to protect your throne in the shadows. But the bridge is built. The flowers bloom. The old song is true." Edwin sagged in his chains. "I did it for Valewood, for strength." Myra's eyes hardened. "You did it for yourself. Exile. Beyond the northern passes. No pack, no kin, no return." Edwin was dragged out, broken, alone, his power stripped like bark from a dead tree. As they left, Myra approached Giselle. "What will you name her?" Giselle looked down at the baby, dark curls, amber-flecked eyes blinking up curiously. "Seren," she said softly, "for Starbridge." They retreated to the border cabin for 3 days, time for healing, for quiet. Torrin built up the fire each night, sang the lullaby to Seren until her tiny eyelids drooped. Giselle watched him, heart full. "You're good at this," she murmured one evening as he rocked the baby in his arms. His wolf piped up in his mind. "Of course I am. Pups love me. Wait till she shifts. I'll teach her all the tricks. Torin smiled. My wolf says he'll teach her to shift. Giselle laughed. Tell him to wait a few years. On the third day, they returned to Stormridge Castle, Giselle riding before Torin on his horse, Seren bundled safe. The gates opened to cheers. Word of the blooming meadow had spread like wildfire. The council waited in the great hall, faces wary, but eyes wide when they saw the child. Torin addressed them firmly. The feud ends. Full restitution for Black Hollow. Lands, gold, whatever Valewood asks. The bridge is built. Whispers turned to nods. Peace talks began that week. Elders from both packs meeting in the blooming meadow, the flowers a constant reminder. In the months that followed, Torin courted Giselle properly. No stolen nights, but deliberate days. Sunrise walks along the castle battlements, his hand in hers as the light turned the mountains gold. Evenings in the library, where he read ancient scrolls while she nursed Seren. One night, as they lay tangled in the royal bed, Giselle traced the new scar on his side. I know now that love isn't a trap. It's home. Torin's wolf hummed happily in his mind. Now, about that second pup. The public mate bond ceremony came under the next full moon, in the blooming meadow. Both packs gathered, Valewood and Stormridge side by side, no weapons, no walls. Giselle wore a gown of silver-threaded blue. Torin in formal leathers marked with both pack symbols. They spoke vows in the old tongue, partnership, protection, loyalty, love. When the claiming bites were renewed, gentle public affirmations, the meadow surged brighter, flowers blooming anew. Both packs joined the lullaby, voices rising as one. 2 years later, Seren toddled through the castle nursery, chubby legs pumping, dark curls bouncing. At 2, she was impossibly cute. Amber eyes wide with wonder, cheeks dimpled when she giggled, tiny hands always reaching for something new. Today, it was her father's fur. Torin lay on the rug in wolf form, massive midnight beast, pretending to doze while Seren climbed him like a mountain. She grabbed fistfuls of fur, pulled herself up to his back, and buried her face in his ruff. Papa Wolf, she squealed, voice high and sweet. Wake up. She patted his ear like it was a drum. Up, up. Torin's wolf huffed, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through his whole body and made Seren giggle harder. Inside his mind, the wolf's voice piped up. Little menace, already bossing me around. Giselle watched from the window seat, laughing softly. The nursery overlooked the mountains, and beyond, visible even from here, the intertwined flowers bloomed eternal, a reminder of the bridge they had built. Seren shifted suddenly, clumsy, partial, wolf ears popping out on her head. She yipped in delight, batting at them with pudgy paws. Ears, like Papa. Torin shifted back, scooping her up in human arms. Look at you, my little star. You're going to outpace me before you're 5. Seren giggled, tugging his beard. Giselle joined them, wrapping her arms around both. Time for bed, Seren. Sunrise walks tomorrow. Seren pouted dramatically, but let Giselle lift her. They tucked her in together, lullaby sung in 3 voices now, Seren's small hand clutching Giselle's finger while Torin traced gentle circles on her back. She was asleep before the final note faded, lashes dark against flushed cheeks, one tiny hand resting open as though waiting for something more to hold. Torin reached into the inner pocket of his tunic and drew out the silver comb, polished to a gentle shine, the same one Giselle had left on his pillow 9 years ago. Turned the comb over in his fingers, tracing the familiar teeth with his thumb. The metal was warm from his body heat. I had the smith rework it, he said quietly. Smaller chain, lighter, for her. He knelt beside the cradle, movements careful so as not to wake Seren. Giselle knelt with him, one hand resting on his back, the other steadying the edge of the small bed. Torin lifted Seren's head just enough and slipped the shortened chain around her neck. The comb settled against her small chest, perfectly sized now, no longer a man's talisman, but a child's keepsake. Seren sighed in her sleep, tiny fingers curling around the comb as though she recognized it instinctively. Torin stayed on his knees, staring at the sight, his daughter holding the very thing that had kept him tethered to hope when everything else had slipped away. Then he looked up at Giselle, beautiful, strong, the woman who had run from him and still found her way back. "This belonged to you first," he said softly. "Then to me, when I thought I'd lost you. Now it's hers, a reminder that love doesn't break. It bends, it bridges, it keeps going." Giselle knelt beside him, pressed her forehead to his. Tears slipped free. "She'll know the whole story someday," she whispered. How her papa ran through the night, how her mama sang him home, how the flowers bloomed because two stubborn wolves refused to let hate win. Torin kissed her, then rested his hand over the comb on Seren's chest, then over Giselle's heart. His wolf stirred. "She's got the comb now. Good. Keeps the luck in the family. And when she's older, maybe we give her a little brother or sister to share it with." Torin huffed a quiet laugh against Giselle's temple. Giselle raised a brow. "What did he say?" Torin smiled. "That the luck stays in the family, and that we should keep it growing." She laughed softly, leaned into him. "Tell him we'll think about it. Every night." They stayed there a long time, kneeling beside the cradle, hands linked over their sleeping daughter, the comb rising and falling with her gentle breaths. Outside, the mountains slept under stars, the meadow bloomed on, eternal, and their bridge held strong. "What time is it where you are? Let's meet in the comments. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people find my stories."